Thanks to my brother, Michael Berry, for filling in yesterday. All right, you're not going to want to miss this monologue. I've been thinking about it for 3 days. I want to do some math with you. And I hate math, by the way. This year's budget is about $3.6 trillion for the federal government. It's stunning. The deficit this year alone is predicted to be $1.65 trillion. The deficit for last month alone, February, was $223 billion. And the Republicans propose only $61 billion in cuts, and the Democrats propose another $6.5 billion, which is actually $4.7 billion, according to the Congressional Budget Office. They even lie about their minuscule proposed quote-unquote cuts. That's paperclip money for the federal government. Now, does this sound to you like anyone is serious about cutting spending or cutting the deficit, let alone cutting the debt? If every penny of the Republican proposed $61 billion in cuts is adopted, the deficit this year will be an astounding $1.6 trillion. The continuing resolution agreed to by the Republicans last week includes $105 billion in funding for Obamacare, as Michelle Bachmann pointed out the other day. That money, which is creating the infrastructure for Obamacare in the bureaucracy, is hidden and dispersed throughout all kinds of spending accounts throughout the federal government. It's being spent right now, and they're doing it this way to deceive you and to conceal it from you. And the Republican continuing resolution does not cut one penny of it. In fact, it doesn't even address it. Now, I could sit here and tell you that Speaker Boehner, a majority leader in the House, Cantor, and McConnell on the Senate side are doing a real bang-up job. I could sit here and do what the other hosts do and put a smiley face on the new House majority, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to my kids. This is weak, and it's unacceptable. Boehner carefully selected his team and put him in these committee chairmanships. He wants no dissent from within the Republican ranks in the House. He so far has succeeded in keeping tight control over those freshman members who we sent to Washington to reverse our current course. And I'm frankly very unimpressed with this Republican leadership. Boehner has said over and over again, so even Obama can hear him, anyone can hear him, he opposes shutting down the federal government, says he's not going to do it. Okay, fine. Now what are you going to do? What are your negotiating points? You just surrendered the biggest one. Oh, I know. We're being told that this year is half over and that this budget really isn't a Republican budget. What does that mean? Half a year? They will have been in office 9 months come September. That's the end of the fiscal year. Of course it's a Republican budget. So in Washington, they're fighting over the difference between $61 billion and $6.5 billion, which is really $4.7 billion. The Republican versus the Democrat cuts, quote unquote. So what kind of debate is this? Are the Republicans so incompetent and impotent that they can't muster the political strategies and language to explain to the American people that we're headed for the abyss, that our country's being destroyed from within, and that this generation needs to stand up for the next generation? Is it really that hard to explain why public broadcasting, which makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year, needs to be privatized? Is it really so hard to explain why Head Start, which is so minimal accomplishment, needs to be cut? Is it really so hard to explain why the national parks need to be closed a few weeks so our children can survive another generation? Is it really that hard to do? The left is destroying the civil society. They are destroying the nature and culture of our society. They are consuming our liberty and our private property at a rate unknown before. They are running Ponzi schemes one after another. They are wasting hundreds of billions of dollars. They are fattening the bureaucracy. They are building monuments to themselves. And they are doing so at the expense of our children by spending wealth that hasn't even been created yet. Is this really that hard to explain? Let me tell you something. Boehner, Cantor, McConnell, the rest of the GOP leadership in Congress had nothing to do with the Tea Party movement. They were resigned to minority status for decades to come. We, the people, we rose up. We said no more. We did the hard work. We rallied. We protested. We organized. We voted. And it just so happens that these men were in the right position to benefit politically. They now have more power than they would otherwise have had, but for you. We're not some group to be managed. We're not some fringe group. We're not to be disrespected. We're the heart and soul of this nation. And we can just as easily take down the Republican leadership and the Republicans as we built it and them up. We don't have time for these games anymore. And we are not impressed with the symbolism and the empty words. Well, the Republicans only control one house, they tell us. Isn't that what Boehner tells us? So they can only do so much. We're not stupid. We know that. But what can you do? That's not an excuse for timidity. How could you possibly agree to a continuing resolution that funds Obamacare? Yet that's exactly what you voted on in the House because you don't want a confrontation with Reid and Obama about closing the government. How do we know this? Because you keep telling us that. The American people don't want Obamacare. How many damn ways do they have to tell you this? Now, it's time for some of you freshman Republicans who we voted for, who we supported with our donations, to break out. We don't hear from you. It's time for you to object and to demand rather than become reliable votes for the Republican leadership. It's time for you to be heard and to become a factor in this city. There needs to be thunder on the right. There needs to be a rebellion within the House Republican caucus. And it has to be remembered that Ronald Reagan took on the Republican Party. He led a rebellion against the Republican Party. He called for a new Republican Party. He was opposed by the National Republican Committee. He was opposed by the longtime Republican office holders. He was opposed by the Washington elite, just like you will be. So what? Who cares? And the Tea Party movement didn't hand you Republican leaders your new power so you could get new offices and have interviews with 60 Minutes and Leslie Stahl. We gave you power to change the course of this nation, to reestablish constitutional government, and to protect our families, now and in the future, from a form of government that will enslave our children to debt and torment our children endlessly. And what are you doing? You're not doing enough. You Republican freshmen, you're not being heard out here. You're not making progress. You're allowing yourselves to be manipulated. You're fighting over crumbs. We can't hear you. We can't see you. Where are you? Break free. I said in Liberty and Tyranny, the statist has constructed a Rube Goldberg array of laws and policies that have institutionalized his objectives. His success breeds confidence in the limitlessness of his endeavors. For the conservative, the challenge is dawning and the road will be long and hard. But it took the statists nearly 80 years to get here, and it will take the conservative at least as long to change the nation's direction. But there's no time to waste. The conservative must act now, and in doing so, he must reject the ideological boundaries the statist and the neo-statist seek to impose on him, since they're self-defeating. That's 2 years ago. He must be resolute in purpose, yet flexible in approach. He must search out opportunities and exploit them. He must be overt and covert. He must not reject compromise if the compromise is likely to advance the founding principles. But he must reject compromise if the compromise is of little consequence and a diversionary end in itself. Gee, what's that sound like? I said the conservatives must take heart from and learn the lessons of his nation's history. America's founding, the Civil War, World War II, were epic and at times seemingly insurmountable wars of liberty against tyranny, which would have destroyed the civil society had they been lost. The challenge today is in many ways more complicated because the soft tyranny comes from within and utilizes the nation's instrumentalities against itself. However, it is also a bloodless struggle and therefore should enlist all conservatives with the courage of their convictions. So what's happening? More timidity. As for the Democrat Party and its leaders, what is their ultimate goal? How much spending is enough? How much government is enough? When will we know? How will we know? When it's too late? Are they so devoid of morals and common sense that they don't see the road to hell they are paving with China's money and money from future generations? Are these people so hate-filled against their own country and fellow citizens and so committed to a mindless cause that they are enthusiastically committed to our evisceration? Are they so drunk by their own ideology and ambition that they are hell-bent on destroying the most tolerant, free, compassionate, prosperous, and dynamic society ever known to man? These are not people to be negotiated with, for they are not people of goodwill or good faith. These are people whose agenda is no longer legitimate, for the agenda is dangerous and destructive. Exactly where would the Democrat Party of today drag this country if it had complete will over us? What kind of nation would this become? What kind of society would this become? What of the Constitution? What of individual liberty? What of private property rights? What exactly does the Democrat Party stand for today? Isn't it time we demanded to know with some degree of specificity and exactitude? The Democrat Party cannot tell us where they want to go, but they demand that we go there anyway. The Democrat Party lacks voices of reason, voices of statesmanship, courageous voices of opposition to self-destruction. It speaks with one voice, a voice that has clearly taken sides, not with liberty, but tyranny. Now, we have an opportunity in this country that few civilizations experience. That is to see our future under liberty or tyranny, and to influence the outcome before it's too late, before this grand civil society is swallowed up by an all-powerful federal government. We damn well expect the Republican leadership to get the message. And if they don't, I'm going to leave an effort to replace them. We'll be right back. $223 billion. That was the deficit in February. They're proposing a $61 billion cut, and the Democrats are proposing effectively a $4.7 billion cut, which is nothing. Now, keep this in mind. This is on top of two massive spending increases when the Democrats control Congress and the White House. This is on top of a GAO report that says $100 to $200 billion is lost through inefficiencies and overlap in the federal government. What does this tell you about what we're up against? It tells you, number one, the Democrats don't care. They seek to destroy this society as it is and remake it into something else they cannot even define, the contours of which they can't even draw. And what does it say about the Republicans? Have they changed? Proposing a $61 billion cut when last month's deficit was $223 billion? Almost 4 times the cut they proposed for the rest of the year? And who negotiates like the Speaker of the House, going all over network TV saying, I don't want to close the government, I don't support closing the government? Why isn't he out there saying something different, which is, I am here with the Republicans to save this country, to make sure your children enjoy the same freedom and prosperity that we have today, and if we have to close a national park for 3 weeks, so be it. But instead we get silliness. Instead, we get a desire to be interviewed by the liberal media. Where are our statesmen? I'll be right back.